Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposing SMG. I listened to the new episode of Meghan Markle's Archetypes podcast, so you don't have to, and here's my review. I'm going to tell you what she says, I'll give you my thoughts, and if you guys enjoy these weekly podcast reviews where I focus on one episode at a time, let me know in the comments and I'll keep doing them. I also recently did a big review on the podcast and my problem with it, so be sure to check that video out. So this week's episode is called To Be or Not to Be, and it features guests Melody Hobson and Victoria Jackson. Of course, Meghan will be focusing on the B word here and how she can't find it in herself to say it. But before we jump straight into that, let's see how Meghan opens up the podcast. Also, side note, I did myself a huge favor today, call it an act of self-love, but I listened to the podcast at a sped up version so I can ditch all the breathy pauses. And let me tell you, it helped me get through this episode a lot faster than I would have originally. So Meghan starts talking a lot about how she's a big fan of TV shows, Jeopardy being her favorite because she just loves facts. Before getting to that, she first has to run through a whole minute spiel of how she was raised with television, unlike today's generation, which is raised by social media. She even says that when the host Alex Trebek passed away, people started sending her their condolences because everyone who knew her knew that Jeopardy was so meaningful to her life and she just loves facts so much. This makes her start talking about how much she loves words. Yes, words. She said she loved grammar and people with expansive vocabularies. After all, she wasn't the pretty one growing up, she was the smart one, right?
For me, again, it's like, okay, well, I'm not the pretty one. I was like, I was the smart one. I'm the smart one. I'm the smart one.
Then she starts listing words that start with the letter B, and she starts listing beautiful, blessed, brilliant, beguiling, blah, 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 blah. That also starts with the letter B. Then we reach the point of the podcast where she says, and yet when you hear someone say the B word, I think we're all clear that none of the words that I just said is what they're talking about.
The B word? I think we're all clear that none of the words that I just said is what they're talking about.
No duh. Now bear with me guys, because this is the part where I felt like I was gonna have a stroke, and I'm sorry, but I just want you to listen to it.
It's referring to instead, you know what? I'll just let someone else lead the charge here.
I call my girlfriends bitch all the time. I'm like, hey bitch.
She can't bring herself to say the word bitch, so she brings on an old friend, Robin Thede, to say it for her. Now, both Robin and Meghan went to Northwestern University together, and Robin says that she was a fellow Wildcat with Meghan because the school mascot is Willie the Wildcat. To which Meghan responds, I was always more of a mild cat, let's be honest.
You know, I'm a fellow Wildcat with Meghan.
Woo! That's true. I was always more of a mild cat. Let's be honest.
I don't know how to describe it, but you know when someone always has to be different, quirky, not like the other girls. Meghan's not a wildcat, she's a mild cat. She was chugging milk in the library and reading up on the history of Thomas Jefferson. She's just so different. Oh Meg, that word nerd. Like, she does not miss an effort to specialize herself and be like, oh no, I'm not like you. And this overly posh and prissy manner is what's going to be the end of this podcast for her, but I digress. Robin then talks about how the word would have negatively impacted her more at 25 than at 42, and then she refers to the word as a slur. Now, because we live in such a modern day age of the word where girls call their best friends it, and it's been reclaimed as something completely different than it was originally meant for, I don't know if I want to classify it as a slur because I just feel like that belittles the impact of actual slurs, but that's my opinion, let me know what you think. But guys, wait for it. We're not even 5 minutes in, and Meghan's agenda behind why she wanted to make an hour-long episode on this word is revealed. Dun 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 dun. Oh, she's difficult. There it is! The thesis behind why Meghan chose the topic. Do you guys remember back in school when an English teacher would say, choose a thesis for an assignment and explain why that is your thesis? Well, my thesis is, Meghan's Archetypes podcast is not a podcast aimed at helping women get out of stereotypes in 2022, but instead, it's her revenge podcast to get back at every little word that she has ever been called. If you don't know, when Meghan was working as a senior royal, she was nicknamed the Duchess of Difficult because, well, she had a problem with everything. And it's funny because it's palace staff who nicknamed her that. Literally the people who worked for her. And let me just take an unpopular tangent here, but if someone is describing you for what you are, that's not a label. That's not you being oppressed. That's you being what you are.
The point is that these people who felt they were bullied, who left their jobs, are still in an emotionally fragile and fraught state today. That speaks not of being spoken harshly by a demanding boss, it speaks of bullying and the psychological effects of that bullying.
If Meghan was shouting at Kate's staff, which is what the reports were at the time saying, and I call her mean or rude, that's not me sheltering poor little Meghan into a stereotype. That's her being mean and rude. Meghan was reportedly demanding attention by snapping her fingers and shouting at staff. Her nickname didn't come from her getting what she wants, as she implies in the podcast. It comes from her being condescending to literally workers. And if the shoe fits, I would call her a bitch too. There were many reports back then that said that Meghan couldn't play second fiddle to Kate, who was dubbed one of the nicest royals. She's always been nice to staff, and the proof is there because her staff didn't start dropping like flies when they started working for her. Something Meghan can't say. I mean, for real guys, there was a whole investigation into the bullying that Meghan did against palace staff. I made a whole video about that, so go check it out to refresh your memory. But basically, it says a lot when you go and harass people who work for you. You know what they say, you first get to know a person when you see how they treat waiters, janitors, or anyone that works for them. And just like Meghan wants to go into the history of the B word in her podcast, we can go into the history of why she garnered that reputation for herself. Just like she vomits word salad everywhere, when confronted with her actions, she weaponized racism in her favor.
She's portrayed herself as a victim of the royal family. And what they're saying is there are two sides to this, and actually there are other victims here as well.
But I think it says a lot when the complaints were coming from people who worked for her as opposed to with her. And for such a smart girl that Meghan claims she is,
I was like, I was the smart one, I'm the smart one, I'm the smart one.
You would think she understands that. But Mrs. Smart Word Nerd continues and says that the word difficult is really just a euphemism for the B word. Meghan, sweetheart, do you know what euphemism means? A euphemism is an indirect or mild way of saying an expression. It's almost like a professional way of saying something. For example, saying passed away instead of died, let go instead of fired, downsizing instead of budget cuts, things like that. Just because you were called difficult for your difficult behavior doesn't mean there was an indirect insult to it. The insult came first from how she treated staff, a story that has never been debunked. Meghan just tries to find a way around it.
There were reports of staff leaving, there were reports of staff in tears.
She then says it's not even a euphemism, but really a code word for the B word. Girl, grow up. Meghan then talks about how Robyn is reclaiming the word, such as the phrase bad bitch, which is a compliment. Meghan then continues and gives us a bunch of examples of how the word has been reclaimed. And does anyone else have an issue with finding the point? Like, Meghan can't even bring herself to say the big bad B word, and yet she starts off the first 10 minutes with a guest who uses that word often, reclaimed it, and then proceeds to give 60,000 examples of how the word is used positively in today's society. So what does this say about Meghan, who's just so respectful she can't even bring herself to utter the word? It again gives the I'm better than you superiority complex that she clearly struggles with. And here's a fun fact about Meghan. She used to have a swearing problem. For her New Year's resolutions on her blog The Tig, she writes, "Run a marathon, stop biting my nails, stop swearing, relearn French. These make my New Year's resolution list." And this was written on December 1st, 2016. And of course it makes sense that we get to see a little bit of the real Meghan before she rebranded every cell and molecule in her body when she started dating Harry. Now she plays a few more clips of Robyn reclaiming the word, and she says something that almost gave me a brain aneurysm almost instantly.
I can't. I mean, for a person who hates the word so much, this is giving me hives.
And then she states that she has zero interest in reclaiming that term.
I have zero interest in reclaiming this term. But these women I respect, whose work I love, a lot of them are entirely comfortable with that.
Guys, at this point, we are only 7 minutes in, and I feel like I'm going to die from the holier-than-thou attitude. Isn't it a little insulting to bring in a guest, play their work, claim that it gives you hives, and say that you have zero interest in reclaiming something that your guest is known for? It's insulting and pretty childish. She then talks about some book by a zoologist, and Meghan can't even bring herself to say the title of the book.
Zoologist Lucy Cook, author of... I'm not going to actually say the first word. I'm just going to call it the B word.
And truly, at this point, it's like you are doing too much. She then plays the author talking about the book and how she doesn't believe that the word bitch is a bad thing and that it shouldn't even be considered a swear word. After rambling for nearly 10 minutes, Meghan is finally going to introduce the episode, and you can see throughout the whole podcast that she's using the words bitch and difficult as if they're synonymous.
Difficult or pushy, or the B word.
Like, you have to be uneducated and annoying as hell to try to make a synonym for a word because it's part of your revenge agenda. Like, truly, I don't know how she got the green light for this episode or for any episode really. She continues to emphasize this and says,
calling someone the B word, labeling them as difficult, it's often a way to insult and dismiss someone.
She also says that calling a woman a bitch is a deflection from a woman's awesome and persistent qualities. She then introduces her guests and says that they are incredible stories of resilience, perseverance, and success. And maybe it's just me finding a problem, but again, I don't see the correlation between the word that 41-year-old Meghan Markle can't bring herself to say and the stories of success or trauma with women. And this is a theme in her podcast. She brings on these women, chooses a theme that she has a vendetta for, and either showcases the bad about the women's careers or fits them into the so-called molds that she claims she wants them to break out of. Or just insults them completely. Something I found funny was how Meghan said that labeling women like this is a way of taking someone's power or keeping them in their place.
There were reports of staff leaving, there were reports of staff in tears.
Now, by her logic, if she's told to pipe down and not berate staff, that's not taking her power away or keeping her in a place because, as I've said earlier, it says a lot when the complaints were made from staff and not from colleagues or someone who's on the same pedestal. So if anything, it proves that Meghan was abusing her power, but she didn't want someone to tell her, hey, maybe you shouldn't fight with a child over dresses? Melody Hobson finally speaks, and she talks about her difficult upbringing with a single mom and how her mother's unconventional parenting style made her learn how to be self-sufficient. Basically, they talk for a while about this, and I just know Meghan is itching to throw her own 2 cents in how she doesn't like the B word. That, by the way, has no correlation to this conversation with Melody. They talk about how Melody gets told by people that she's so much nicer than they thought she would be and how that's a bad thing. I have a hot take here. Ultimately, I believe that it all comes down to how you carry yourself. If you carry yourself in a strong-minded and opinionated way, you are going to intimidate people. It's not about being boxed in these stereotypes because as someone who has a platform, I've been told countless times, both online and in real life, that I intimidate people. And it's natural to be intimidating when you stand out and say whatever you want, especially in a time where everyone's social anxiety won't allow them to ask for extra sauce in McDonald's. So the entire time they are basically discussing human interaction and how there is a different response in behavior from people depending on how you present yourselves. Which is like, no duh. I took a sociology class in college. I really didn't need to listen to Meghan Markle's podcast to state the obvious. At this point, we're almost 30 minutes in, and Meghan says that the only time that the B word should be used is when you're talking about a female dog.
However, there is maybe one instance where the use of the B word seems to, I guess, be acceptable. I'm talking about when it's referring to a female dog.
Then she gives us a history lesson against her will because she loves etymology.
I love etymology.
She then brings on an author who she also refuses to say the name of her book, and the author makes a lot of good points because they start talking about how women are treated unfairly in the press and how they are always dehumanized. She also brings up solid examples of this happening today or in the past in pop culture. Now, as someone who has run a blog for so many years, dissecting celebrity culture and talking about women that have been treated this way by the press, I totally agree. I'm not going to deny facts, and the takeaway of my video isn't women don't face these issues. But you have to understand that I'm criticizing Meghan Markle, who is using valid issues as a way to get revenge and wreak havoc because she was exposed for her true behavior. And it's sad because I feel like she's bringing on these women and almost exploiting their stories so she can get off their pain while she weaponizes these stories to defend herself against accusations that have never been debunked, just avoided. Victoria Jackson comes on and tells a really sad story about something very traumatic that happened to her. And by the end of the podcast, you're just left feeling upset, overwhelmed, and ultimately confused because I didn't see the correlation in Meghan's role with any of these strong women who came on to tell heartbreaking stories of trauma or difficult upbringings. I said this on Twitter. Who is Meghan Markle trying to fool by making it seem like she's too shy and nice to say the B word? At an effort to sound like the kindest person on earth, coming off as too posh and prissy isn't going to make you relatable or likable. It's okay to be a little real with people. Celebrities who always go the extra mile to sound vanilla perfect always have their image crumbling. And it's always the people that have the most perfect image that are the opposite of that. Check out this clip of Miley Cyrus talking about this in 2013.
Like, enjoy the life that I have rather than try to always be so perfect.
And if you are familiar with Miley, you know that she gets a lot of hate for who she brands herself as a person in public, while her peers who always appear so perfect are actually the ones who have a lot more to hide than she does.
And when you talk to someone that pretends like they're perfect, you just want them to f up so bad. Because it's so annoying what they're doing because you know it's not true. You know you go to their room and they're like a psychopath. You can tell who's real because people that are too nice or, too proper, they're secretly a psycho.
And that perfectly emulates my problem with Meghan because she tries too hard to conceal something that she has already been exposed for multiple times. Remember when she was leaving the chapel on the day of her wedding and she literally dropped the F-bomb? And again, I don't have a problem with cursing. It's the people who want to act holier than thou that piss me off. And it's obvious that she had a problem with Kate because Kate was everything she wasn't, and she was mad that people preferred Kate, who isn't going to berate her staff or throw hot tea in the air like Meghan was accused of. All I'm saying is that there are more than enough reports of Meghan's difficult, and dare I say it, bitchy behavior, and if it was false, she would have sued everyone by now because on the criteria for defamation, her character has definitely been ruined, and she probably doesn't get job opportunities because of this, which is why she resorted to starting her own companies. But the biggest defender against defamation is the truth. A rumor can make her lose millions and ruin her life, but no one is going to be successfully sued if it was on the basis of truth. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's why Meghan has created this whole empire where she can listen to herself talk because no one else is going to hire her because of her reputation. A senior Disney executive once told Daily Mail, "Meghan needs Disney more than Disney needs Meghan. She's a controversial figure. There have been reports of a deal, but that's not true beyond the voiceover work." Anyway, that's my review and recap of what Meghan said in her new podcast episode. Let me know if you agree or disagree and give me your thoughts in the comment section down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Follow us on our social media, like and subscribe for more, and as always, I'll see you next time.
I'm not going to actually say the first word.